Welcome to the 2013 Bloomington Residents Survey results. My name is Diane Kirby, and I'm the Director of Community Services for the City of Bloomington. Right now, I'm going to review with you the results of the citizen survey that was conducted here in Bloomington between May and June of 2013. This was the second year in a row that the City of Bloomington conducted a resident survey. The last survey was conducted in May and June of 2012. This is part of the city's participation in the State Auditor's Officer Performance Measurement Program for cities. This involves a set of 10 standard performance measures of cities that aid residents and elected officials in determining the efficiency of cities participating in the program. The Bloomington City Council adopted the 10 performance measures back in 2011. The city selected the National Research Center out of Boulder, Colorado again in 2013 to conduct its citizen survey. The National Research Center was selected because of the following advantages. First, it offered a lot of options for analyzing the data. It also offered the opportunity to benchmark against their database of 500 communities nationwide, as well as a set of cities of the City of Bloomington's choosing. And finally, the company offered the opportunity to compare our survey results from last year with this year's survey results. Here's a look at the methodology that was used for the citizen survey. This was a random sample scientific survey of Bloomington homes. The assessment method was by mail, as well as respondents were offered the option to go online to fill out the survey. The City of Bloomington decided to expand the sample again this year from the standard 1,200 homes that is typically offered to 3,000 homes. And that was because we wanted the margin of error to be reduced. It was reduced from plus or minus 5% to plus or minus 3% as a result. The survey was mailed to respondents twice between May 1 and June 5th of 2013. The response rate was down slightly from last year. This year's response rate was 34% compared to 37% this year. But this is still a very valid response rate. The typical response rate for these kinds of surveys is 25 to 40%. And typically, the floor that you want for a survey is a response rate of 30%. This means that the statistical validity for this survey is very high when you look at the overall sample. It is also quite good for the various breakdowns by demographic and geographic categories. And we did break out the data by 4 demographic characteristics as well as geographic by council district. More than half the cost of the survey is being paid for by the State Auditor's Office, again as part of the Performance Measurement Program. Looking at the question focus areas, we tried to focus on community strengths and weaknesses in this survey and also identify our service strengths and weaknesses within the City of Bloomington. There were 7 focus areas. They were community quality, community design, public safety, environmental sustainability, recreation and well-being, community inclusiveness, civic engagement, and public trust. The National Research Center has a database of 500 jurisdictions around the country that we could compare our survey results against. Then we also had selected surveys. These are comparable surveys used for custom comparisons. So the City of Bloomington's planning staff selected 21 cities based on 5 characteristics that we wanted to be compared against. And those 5 characteristics were the type of management within that city, the income less than $99,000 per household, demographics of more than 43% white, geographic size, and similar growth characteristics to Bloomington. The asterisks denote Bellevue cities, and this is a group of 9 U.S. cities with similar populations and characteristics, such as proximity to major transportation hubs and an international airport. 4 cities were in the research company's database: Scottsdale, Arizona, Sunnyvale, California, Naperville, Illinois, and Bellevue, Washington. Now let's take a look at the demographic breakdown of the respondents. First of all, in terms of geographic distribution, the survey respondents were fairly well spread out across the city. You'll note there are open spaces within the map of Bloomington. Those denote commercial, industrial, or retail areas and parks, lakes, open spaces, or undeveloped property. Looking at the response rate by council district, you'll note that the survey respondents were really fairly evenly spread out by council district. Now let's take a look at the profile of the respondents to the survey. The respondent profile again closely tracked Bloomington's 2010 census, as well as the survey respondents from last year's citizen survey. There were slightly more females than males in the respondent profile. Nearly 70% of the respondents own their own homes. 41% have lived in their homes for more than 20 years. 2/3 are employed either full or part-time. And just let me point out that the not employed category is not the same as unemployed. Bloomington's unemployment rate is under 5%. So this particular rate of 32% denotes primarily folks who are out of the workforce because they are retired. Of the respondents, only 1/4 had children in their home right now, and nearly 1/3 have an adult of 65 or older in the household. 87% of those polled were white, followed by African Americans and Asians at 6%, and Hispanics made up 3% of the respondents. In terms of the ages of the respondents, the toughest group to survey is typically that 18 to 24-year-old age group because they're so mobile, but we still did get 4% of the respondents within that age group. The group with the highest response rate was the 45 to 54-year-olds at 23%, followed closely by 25 to 34-year-olds. In terms of household income, 78% of respondents have household incomes of less than $100,000. And now let's take a look at the survey highlights. This was a very positive report once again, as it was in last year's citizen survey. Bloomington ranks high in almost all of the categories surveyed, especially relative to our 500 benchmark communities. On average, residents gave high ratings to almost all of the city services. When 35 city services were compared to the benchmark database nationwide, 32 were above the benchmark comparison, 3 were similar, and none were below. In addition, this report contains comparisons to last year's results. The differences between 2012 and 2013 results can be considered statistically significant if they are greater than 4 percentage points, and you'll see a few areas where that is the case. First, looking to quality of life in Bloomington, most residents gave high ratings to their neighborhoods and Bloomington as a place to live. 95% praised Bloomington as a place to live. That was much above the national comparison. And 90% again stated that the overall quality of life was excellent or good, similar to last year's ratings. A high percentage of respondents, 86%, once again rated Bloomington as an excellent or good place to raise kids, and that was much above the national comparison. 3/4 of residents again rated Bloomington as an excellent or good place to retire. 89% of respondents again plan to stay in Bloomington for the next 5 years, same as last year, and that was much above the national comparison. And again, 94% would recommend living in Bloomington, much above the national average. A variety of characteristics were evaluated by respondents. Among those characteristics receiving the most favorable ratings in the survey were overall image or reputation of Bloomington at 85%, quality of the natural environment at 88%, and shopping opportunities at 84%. You can see these ratings are generally much above the national benchmarks and our peer communities. Among those community characteristics receiving the least positive ratings were availability of affordable quality childcare, availability of affordable quality housing, and ease of bus travel. Now, these characteristics were the same ones that last year received the least positive ratings. When looking at public trust, 72% of respondents said that the value of the services for the taxes they pay in Bloomington was excellent or good. Now, this placed Bloomington in the top 10% of the benchmark communities nationwide for the value of services for the taxes paid. Nearly 75% of respondents felt the city was on the right track, with the overall direction taken by the city rated as excellent or good. And that placed Bloomington in the top 15% of benchmark communities nationwide. Bloomington was one of the better rated communities in the city comparisons. When looking at how the city of Bloomington ranked against the county, state, and federal governments, residents gave the highest ratings to the city of Bloomington and the lowest to the federal government. However, you'll see the ratings for federal, state, and county governments all went up this year. The city's rating was much above the benchmarks for cities in the peer group and nationwide. In fact, Bloomington ranked in the top 14% of communities nationwide. Respondents were also asked to rate the quality of the service that they receive from the City of Bloomington's employees. First of all, respondents were asked if they had been in contact with a city employee in the past 12 months, and 41% reported that they had been in contact with a city employee within the past 12 months, either by email, in person, or some other contact. Now, that was down a little bit from last year when 43% of respondents had been in contact with a city employee in the past year's survey. This is lower than the national benchmark comparison. Overall, city employees were rated highly. 83% of respondents rated their overall impression with city employees as excellent or good, and Bloomington was much above the national and peer cities comparisons. We took a look at the rankings against our 21 peer cities to see how we ranked versus the other cities, and the city employee ratings were higher than the benchmarks and similar to last year, and in overall impression, the city's employees ranked fourth out of the peer cities that were ranked, and they were much above in the peer cities comparison. Next, we'll move on to specific city services, starting with transportation. This was an area that did show some statistically significant shifts from the 2012 survey results. Ratings in particular for street repair and sidewalk maintenance declined from 2012 to 2013. This could maybe be due to the late winter snows that we had experienced that extended into May this year during the survey period. Snow removal, on the other hand, was much above the national and peer benchmarks. In fact, snow removal ranked in the top 10% of communities nationwide. When we took a look at the rankings against our peer cities, both street repair and sidewalk maintenance dropped in the peer cities rankings. Snow removal and traffic signal timing, on the other hand, were ranked number 2. Moving on to utilities, of the 5 utility services shown here, all were much above the national and peer cities benchmark comparisons, and the ratings were similar to last year's. In the peer cities rankings, the city again ranked number 1 against peer cities in the areas of drinking water and sewer services. In fact, Bloomington was also ranked number 5 against communities nationwide, those 500 communities nationwide, for its drinking water. Recycling slipped to number 6 in the peer cities rankings, and garbage collection dropped to number 7. In terms of community appearance, the overall appearance of Bloomington was rated as excellent or good by 79% of respondents. 75% of respondents again said that the quality of new development was excellent or good, much higher than the national benchmark and similar to the peer benchmark. Only 5% of those polled thought that rundown buildings, weeds, and junk vehicles were a major problem. In terms of code enforcement, the areas of land use planning and zoning, code enforcement, and animal control were all much above the national benchmarks. In fact, land use planning and zoning was ranked in the top 9% of the benchmark communities nationwide. In our peer cities rankings, land use planning and zoning also ranked number 2. And now taking a look at public safety, residents were asked to rate their feelings of safety from crime in their neighborhoods and in the city's shopping areas, both during the day and at night. And as you can see, their feelings of safety improved slightly from last year's survey, particularly in shopping areas after dark. These ratings are much above the national and peer cities benchmarks. Residents also were asked to rate the city's public safety services, and they did rate them highly. All were rated much above the benchmark comparisons. And as you can see, the ratings were fairly similar to last year. When looking at the peer cities rankings, Bloomington's traffic enforcement is number 2 and police number 3. In fact, the city's police services and traffic enforcement both ranked in the top 12% of such services nationwide. Looking now at parks and recreation, ratings of the city's parks and recreation programs were much above the national benchmarks. However, the city's recreation centers and facilities were similar to the peer cities benchmarks. In the peer cities rankings, recreation centers and facilities ranked number 9 again this year. Residents were also asked about their sources of information for the City of Bloomington. And the city's newsletter, the Bloomington Briefing, is still a key source of information for residents, with 85% reporting that they read the city's newsletter. That is much more than other communities in the benchmarks. 2/3 of respondents had visited the city's website this past year. One of the features that the National Research Center offers in its survey is a key driver analysis. Well, a key driver analysis examines the relationships between ratings for each service and the ratings of the city services overall. It tries to dig deeper to identify the less obvious but more influential services that are most related to residents' opinions and their ratings of overall quality of their local government. Well, those services that correlated most strongly with residents' overall positive opinion about city service quality are marked with the black keys, and those were city parks, health services, public information, preservation of natural areas. And these are primarily quality of life services. Now, the National Research Center says that focusing on key drivers may be useful to consider for enhancement of overall service ratings. The National Research Center's National Citizen Survey also asked 2 custom questions that were designed by the City of Bloomington. This is the first of the 2 custom questions, and it focused on how important it was for the city to address a variety of issues in Bloomington over the next 5 years. The top 5 responses getting ratings of essential or very important were maintaining city services, addressing crime, maintaining aging city infrastructure like streets and buildings, maintaining competitive schools, and attracting and retaining small businesses. Those responses rounding out the bottom were foreclosures and vacant properties, housing and services for seniors, affordable housing, public transit, poverty and social services, and addressing racial and ethnic diversity. We also did an analysis of this question by subtracting out the not at all important responses from the essential and very important responses. And you'll note that the order of the responses didn't change much, except that public transit moved up 3 spots in the rankings. Thank you for watching the 2013 Bloomington Residents Survey results.